Hi, Com201. We're back again with another Friday YouTube video. Hope you're getting used to our hybrid class situation. If you're having difficulty, please contact me by email or text. Let me know what we can do to help you get through things. While I'm thinking about it, some people have been assigned the wrong book or given the wrong book by your bookstore. It should be this black one, The Art of Public Speaking by Stephen E. Lucas. So if you didn't get this exact book, then you need to contact your bookstore manager and say, hey, you gave me the wrong book. Now, if they have a problem with it, or they're like, no, this is the right book, you can give them my phone number and say, would you call the instructor and talk about this? And I will be like, glad to do it. And then I'll be like, you gave them the wrong book. So you need to make sure you get the right book though, because we are coming upon a test. You've got your first informative speech coming up very soon. We need to make sure you have all the information you need so that you can do your assignments. So let's just jump right in to our class. And first thing I'm going to do is share my screen. And let's see, let's come on slideshow from the current slide. And I'm going to make myself a little bigger so you can see me. There we go. So we've reached the point where we are supporting your ideas. All of the points that you want to make in a speech have to be supported by evidence. You're like, I see a lot of speeches all the time where people just kind of throw out things and they don't really back them up. It has become common. However, if you want people to believe what you're saying, if you want to come across as trustworthy, as reliable, as someone who people should listen to, then you want to use evidence to back up your points. Can people trust what you're saying? Sometimes if you're an expert, they can, but a lot of times they're going to be like, you know, what does this person know about what they're talking about? You know, if you're just some college student that I know, why should I trust what you're saying? That's where we're coming from. And unless you're an expert in that field, and you'd have to explain how you're an expert in that field. And sometimes even when experts are talking, you need backup from reliable, trustworthy sources. So we're going to support all of your ideas. Ways that we do that. First, type an example is an example. An example is a specific case or a situation that you can use to illustrate your point, or that it represents the people or the ideas or the experiences that you're talking about. So it's basically a small bit of information that you can use to extrapolate, okay, here is a situation that's similar to what I'm talking about, and it confirms what I'm talking about. So we have three types of examples. Brief is just basically a sentence or two example. An extended or narrative example, though, is basically where you're telling a story. That's why it's a narrative example. Longer form information. If you're giving a long speech and you have like 2 or 3 paragraphs to really make a point, and you want to use a really good example that's lengthy, you can do it. And then you can also have hypothetical examples. And some people like to start speeches with a hypothetical example, where you're saying, you know, picture this or imagine the situation, you're da 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 da, and you set a scene that's consistent with whatever you're trying to talk about, and get people inside their heads picturing what you're talking about and relating to the idea in that way. That's a hypothetical example. So an example of using an example in a speech, we have former Vice President Al Gore. He had a movie, oh my goodness, this is a while back now. It's called An Inconvenient Truth, where he talks about global warming and its impact on our society. And first, I'm going to show you the video where he gives examples to back up his assertions. So this is going to be fun. I'm going to hit the thing, and then I have to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share with the video. And, you know, at first there is a, share. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. There's always an ad, because it's YouTube. God love YouTube, so we'll watch the ad. It is what it is. But here we go.
Kilimanjaro more than 30 years ago and more recently. And a friend of mine just came back from Kilimanjaro with a picture he took a couple months ago. Another friend, Lonnie Thompson, studies glaciers. Here's Lonnie with a last sliver of one of the once mighty glaciers. Within the decade, there will be no more snows of Kilimanjaro. This is happening in Glacier National Park. I climbed to the top of this in 1998 with one of my daughters. Within 15 years, this will be the park formerly known as Glacier. Here is what's been happening year by year to the Columbia Glacier. It just retreats every single year. And it's a shame because these glaciers are so beautiful, but those who go up to see them, here's what they're seeing every day now.
All right, let's back out of here. Stop share. Then we're gonna share with my PowerPoint. There we go. Did that work? I think it did. So his main idea was that global warming is badly affecting our Earth and our environment. And in this case, he was talking about how you can see the effect of global warming on glaciers, to kind of say, 100 years ago, here's how big these glaciers were. Today, here's how small these glaciers are, or they've disappeared. Those are examples that back up what he's trying to say as the main point of his speech. So he's basically saying, here's a big glacier from 50 years ago. Today it's this small. That's because of global warming. Here's another glacier. It's happening around the world to show this isn't just a narrow effect in one place, but it's happening worldwide. That's a good use of examples. So the next kind of support that we can use for our ideas are statistics. Statistics are all the forms of numerical data that you can use. Now, the fun of statistics are that they give values to your points and your arguments. Sometimes math can be very helpful if you have a scientific concept you're trying to talk about, and one output is 30%, but another output gives you 90%. 30 versus 90 gives people, 90 is quite a bit larger than 30. So I'm leaning towards the better result there. That comes from statistics. You always want to cite your sources with statistics, unless you did the research yourself and you come out and say, hey, I did this research myself and I got 30% versus 90%. But if you didn't do the research yourself, you need to say where you got it. As you well know, and we will probably talk about this in class in addition, you can manipulate statistics. You can pick and choose the statistics that back up, whatever point you're trying to make. You can always find numbers that will support what you want to say. And by at least saying where you got the numbers that you're using, people can evaluate, okay, that's a logical source, or that's a sketchy source. I don't trust what they're saying. Or if it's good, then you're like, okay, I back up what the CDC says versus, crazyscience.com. So always say where you got your info. And then you want to explain or interpret why the stats are important or impressive. Why is 90% so much better than 30%? Sometimes we have to use numbers in my work, and we have to kind of show or explain to people, distances, which might be hard to have as a concept. And I think, yep, well, I'll do this instead. For example, if we are doing a project where we're resurfacing an interstate, and I want to say we're resurfacing, 12 miles of interstate I-75. It sounds like a lot. Oh goodness, how much interstate is that? Well, if I say that's the distance between McDonough, Georgia and Morrow, Georgia, and you drive I-75 from Henry County to Clayton County each day, that gives you in your mind reference points. And that's what you want to do with statistics sometimes, is explain, okay, this means it's like this to this. And not just say, 12 miles or 13 miles. But you want to give people references or frames of reference that they can use to interpret those statistics. And at the bottom, they can be good visual aids. You can use charts, graphs, ways that can explain either really huge numbers or numbers that don't make sense, if you just think of them as numbers. And I think we have a good example This is another speech. This is Bill Gates talking about the problem of dire poverty in the world. So let's hope that I can do this properly again. So we're going to stop sharing, and now I'm going to share the video.
A single dot is representing 1 million people. Right now, you're seeing the number of dots that represent the number of people who overcame poverty since 1990. It's really great to see how we've made that incredible reduction, because it hints, okay, what remains? What do we have to do in the future? The progress came really in two great ways. The first wave was China. In 1990, 66% of people in China were extremely poor. They can see all the dots there, each representing, again, 1 million people. But over just a short period, 15 years, their extreme poverty declined by over 500 million. The improvement in people's lives there is one of the most astonishing examples of progress in world history. The second wave came in India. Progress there started later, and it's been more gradual, but it's also an impressive trend. India went from 400 million people in extreme poverty in 2005 to just under 100 million today. And over the next several decades, that number is going to drop quite a bit.
All right, so
here,
let's say bye to Bill. Let me stop sharing. Let me put my presentation back. You know, he's talking about numbers that are billions, which are huge. And even when he's talking about like 751 billion versus 381 billion, you know, okay, the 700 and something's bigger than that. You know, how impactful is that? Well, he uses the dots to kind of show how much of a reduction we've seen over time. And when you're talking about billions, sometimes if you can shrink things down in a way that kind of makes sense, I mean, with the chart, it really helps to kind of get rid of the math, but you can see the point. And that's what we need to do, is make sure people understand, okay, here's the math of it, but here is the point of what we're trying to say. Things are actually worldwide getting much better with people living in dire poverty, but we still have work to do. So there's Bill Gates. And our third way that we can support ideas in speeches is through testimony. Testimony are quotations or paraphrases that come from people that support what we're going to say. They illustrate the points we want to make. They can be expert and give expert testimony, or peers and give peer testimony. Experts are like scientists, people who are well experienced in what they're talking about. And if I were to mention, you know, such and such is a scientist who studied this, okay, that person, their testimony, I'm going to trust. With peers, sometimes you can give and relate the experiences of people you know, but you're going to have to explain why that person is valuable in helping to support your idea. And then you want to make sure that people understand that it is basically just an example, but sometimes a really well-placed peer testimony, like a narrative example, can help to personalize and be really creative, get attention in your speech. Quote versus paraphrase. Hopefully you all know what the difference is. A quote is direct, exactly what the person said, and a paraphrase is a summary that basically says what that person said. You want to use a quote if it's not too long, and you want to use the exact words of the person giving the testimony. You can give a paraphrase if it's a super long quote and you don't have time to really list the whole thing, or if it's basically just the concept that's important. Then, as always, we're going to cite your sources, because you have to say where you got that testimony from. And usually you want to, you know, if Abraham Lincoln said such and such, you don't want to just say, you know, there's a saying, or someone once said da da da, because I don't care about someone. But if I say Abraham Lincoln once said da da da, I'm like, okay, that gives me a frame of reference for who said this. You know, honest Abe, reliable guy. I can follow this quote. So you want to basically say where you got that quote from, or that paraphrase, that information in that testimony. So this is Renee Brown. She's another example of how you can support your ideas, and she gives a pretty good one with testimony. I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to put her up.
And I do a search for who was president of the United States during the Johnson Abbott era. Have you ever done that? Like if you're numbing with
I have done that.
And so when it's over, you just like stay in that space by like learning more about the actors and what's going on. I've been doing this long enough to know this is like, you're laughing with me, not at me. So I put it in and Theodore Roosevelt comes up and a quote comes up. And I read it. And this is what it says. It's a quote from a speech that he gave in the early 1900s at the Sorbonne. And a lot of people call it the Man in the Arena speech. And this is the passage that changes my life. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood and sweat and dust, who at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails daring greatly. So the moment that I read that, I closed my laptop, and this is what shifted in me. 3 huge things. First, I spent the last 12 years studying vulnerability. And that quote was everything I know about vulnerability. It is not about winning. It's not about losing.
All right, I'm gonna pause it here or else we could watch the whole thing. We stop sharing, we're gonna put it back on the slideshow. So she does exactly what you should do if you're going to give a testimonial quote in your speech. She says who it is, where they said it, when it was, and in fact, it has a name of the speech, the Man in the Arena speech. Then she gives the quote, and it's long, but because she values that quote so much, she's giving it as a quote and not as a paraphrase. Then she explains why that quote is so important to what she's talking about. That's exactly what you should do if you're going to bring up a testimonial within your speech to support your ideas. So she does a great job with that. I give her an A. All right. I've been talking for a while about citing your sources, and here we're going to talk a little bit about exactly what you should do when you're citing your sources. So in a speech, you have to verbally state who and where your information has come from. When you're writing a report, you have to cite your sources with the parentheses. You have your fact, then you put in parentheses after it, author's name, what the document was, the year, and at the end of your report, you have endnotes, you have a bibliography. We don't, when you give a speech, have like a parentheses, came from this source, and at the end, here are my endnotes. We don't do that. With a public speech, you basically have to insert the phrases that verbally state who or where your information came from. So this is all the stuff that you should aim for. And it sounds like a lot, and it kind of is, but we'll go through some things. You want to at least have 2 of these things, if not more, to kind of strengthen your knowledge of your source to make them even more credible. So we want to talk about the item that you're citing, whether it's a book or it's an article or a blog, the author of that item, why that author is credible if it's somebody that people probably have not heard of before, and then the date that the item was published or uploaded or streamed or spoken. So how does this work? I know it's weird sounding. If I'm giving a speech on gaining confidence in public speaking, and I could do a speech on that, one of my sources could be Dale Carnegie's book. It's written in 1962. It's called The Quick and Easy Way to Effective Public Speaking. It's a landmark book. I suggest you read it if you ever want to read about public speaking. You should. And basically in it, he gives a statistic I want to use. 90% of how well the talk is going to go is determined before the speech even starts. So prep is a huge thing. So that statistic, I didn't come up with. I agree with it. I think it's probably true, which is why I want to use it in my speech, but it's not my information. So I have to cite the source of that information. And here's how I would do it. According to Dale Carnegie, in his landmark book, The Quick and Easy Way to Effective Public Speaking, 90% of how well the talk will go is determined before the speech even starts. So I give the information, but I preempt it with, this is who is saying what I'm going to say next. This is where it came from. And if you've heard of Dale Carnegie, which people my age would have, But if you're your age and you're like, who's Dale Carnegie? You might want to add that he is a popular mid-century self-help guru, is kind of who he is. He's very big on communication. So you could add that information in there too. But just to be brief, saying according to Dale Carnegie in his landmark book, he's the guy who wrote this book where I got this information. Here's what the book is. Here's the fact. Does it seem lengthy and long to say? It is, but it will help you build your credibility regarding the information you're presenting in your speech. All right, so here's a more modern, source that I could cite. If I'm doing a speech on why people should teach kids to cook, I'm doing a lot of stuff on kids cooking lately. I don't know how this topic has gotten stuck in my head, but it has. I'm doing research on the internet, and I find thespruceeats.com, which is a very popular website with home cooks. And there's an article called The Top 10 Reasons to Teach Kids How to Cook. And it's on thespruceeats.com. The author of the article is Stephanie Gallagher, and it was published on February 10th, 2021. And the information that she says in the article is that kids try and they enjoy, according to her, a wider variety of foods if they cook, which I agree with. I think it makes a decent point. It follows up with my thing, kids try more things. They're less picky if they cook their own stuff, and they should learn to cook for that reason. It's not my own idea. I'm not a chef. I am not a child development specialist. I don't have a background in this. I have an idea that happens. So I found somebody who backs up what I think. And then I need to make sure people understand that concept isn't mine. I got that from someone else, Stephanie Gallagher. So remember, in the first example, I started with basically the citation. In this case, I'm going to end with it. And here's how I do that. Kids try and enjoy a wider variety of foods if they cook, says Stephanie Gallagher on thespruceeats.com, a website for home cooks, in her February 2021 article. Does it sound lengthy? It is. But I have to do something there to kind of explain why this is a decent source. I have to say what it is. Now, thespruceeats.com, is that a restaurant website? Is it a cook's website? Is it a chef's website? It's about eating. But if I've never heard of it before, it needs some explanation. So I'm having to explain, why I went to this website and picked this article. It has to be valid. So I have to explain that. So I say, this fact says the author of on this website, which is a website for home cooks, in her article, when it said. This lets people know, one, it's not my fact, but it's backing up my assertion, and that you can believe this, or it's a trustworthy idea because it comes from somebody who is reliable when it comes to home cooking. Make sense? All right. Whew. That's a lot of information about citing and about information that we can use to back up our sources or back up our points. We're moving into actual speech giving, which I know y'all are ready for, but it's coming up quicker than you think. So we need to really jump on the actual kinds of speeches you're going to be giving. And the first one is informative speeches. So we're speaking to inform. The types of informative speeches. We always have to start with definitions. So informative speeches include speeches about objects. Now, objects are anything, but really it's kind of any noun. It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a thing. Anything that can be described or explained. And that's kind of what they tend to be, our explanation speeches. Speeches about processes. Those explain how things are done or how they work. A how-to speech, for example, is a speech about a process, how to make a pizza, how to write a book. Those are all about the process of making a pizza or writing a book. So those are also informative speeches. Then we have speeches about events that talk about either current or past history. And they're about happenings. They're also explanatory. They explain the history of a certain event and why it's important, why it should be important to us. And then we have speeches about concepts or ideas. They're also explanation speeches, but you have to really provide some great sources for those. Sometimes if we're talking about philosophical ideas or concepts that are necessarily not logical, but you're trying to let people see, ideas that you think are interesting, you have to get the right sources and really interpret the information in a way that's going to be meaningful to your audience. So when you're preparing an informative speech, things you need to think about. First of all, don't overestimate what the audience knows. This is important because there are going to be some things that you're like, oh, everybody knows that. I don't have to explain it. When the truth is, some people might, but some people might not. If I'm, for example, doing a how-to speech on how to write a book, that was one I just thought of a second ago. I might assume that people know all the different parts of a book, the flyleaf, the pages, the spine, the binding, and people might know them, but a lot of people might not. A lot of those terms are kind of going away now that we have the internet. And so I need to make sure people understand, if I'm talking about all the different parts of an actual book, that they are with me and they understand what I'm talking about. You need to find ways to make your topic relate to the audience. There are some experiences that we kind of all have. And sometimes if you have a topic that might be esoteric or interesting to you, you can sometimes use shared emotions to kind of help people feel that way about your topic. So, remember when we talked about hypothetical examples, we've all been there in the kitchen, a small kid tugs on you, mommy, I want to help, I want to help. You might be tempted to say no, because there are knives, there's hot water, when in actuality, a lot of experts say this might be something you should take seriously. That could be a way I begin my speech, and I find a way to make it relate to the audience. I'm putting them in their kitchen. Maybe some people have that experience of dealing with kids while they're cooking. So that might be a way I start my speech, and it gets people into the headspace I'd like them to be in. Don't use specialized jargon or be too technical, unless that's the specific audience you're dealing with. If you're dealing with an audience full of engineers, for example, then you can use engineering terms. They would get it. If you're talking to a lay audience, just a generalized audience, you want to make sure that the words you use are going to be words that they understand. I deal with engineers all the time working at the Department of Transportation. Quite often, they'll talk to me and I don't have a clue the first time they mention what they're talking about. So I have to then back. If you're saying this to your grandma, trying to explain what you're doing, what would you say? And that's kind of what you need to do sometimes with your speeches, making sure that if people aren't likely to understand the terms that you're using, if you're going to explain it to your mom or your grandma so they would get it, that's kind of what you have to do. You sometimes want to personalize your topic, bring out your own personal stories or experiences if those topics have personal meanings for you. If I'm talking about cooking with kids, I can talk, when I was a kid, my mom would have me mix dough or mix batter because it was something I could do. She could trust me to do it. I wasn't dealing with anything sharp or hot, but I was participating and it made me interested in the food that I was eating. So I'm using experience from my own background to kind of color what I'm saying and give it some, relatability. I can use my personal experience. Other people will be like, oh, maybe you did that when you were a kid, maybe you didn't, but you can see why I'm interested in it and it helps you be interested in it. So be creative, find different ways to make your topic interesting, because that's really the whole point of when you give a public speech. You want people to actually listen to it. It needs to be relatable, but you need to find ways. Sometimes topics, I would love to talk about public speaking, for example, because it's what I do a lot. You'd probably think a speech about that would be boring. So if I'm going to give that speech, I need to find a way that you will actually listen to it. And I do that by being creative. So here is an example of an informative speech. This is a high school kid who participated in the National Speech and Debate Tournament in 2016. She's at the national level, so the speech got her some awards. We're going to listen to the beginning, and then we're going to chat a little bit about it. So here is, click the link. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I want to share her. So here's Serena.
Ever since I was a little girl, my mom has Serena, what do you want to be when you grow up? And even though I was 5 and barely potty trained, I knew that I wanted to do something meaningful, something that saves lives. Sorry, Mom, it wasn't a doctor or a lawyer. No, I wanted to be a superhero. I mean, I had the whole thing planned out. My name would be Super Serena, and I could change my veggies into candy. But now that I'm 17, I might need a little more mature of a superpower. So I read a couple comic books. And I realized that superheroes were so much more than just their superpowers. Rather, they take their powers and abilities to help others and build a better community. So first, let's put on our capes as we fly through the history of superheroes. Then, let's squeeze into our unicorns and tights as we expose the positive and negative influence of these iconic figures. Before finally taking on our super's identity as we discover our own superpower. Art reflects history, especially if current.
All right, so let's back out of Serena here. Let's turn her off, and I'm gonna stop sharing. All right, so interesting, informative speech. I mean, she was very perky, and she started with a personal story. She personalized, so I think she was very creative with how she began her speech. And you know what it's about superheroes. And she does what you're supposed to do in an introduction, which is 1, getting attention, and then 2, basically give your central thesis, explain what people are going to hear about in your speech. You know, basically you're going to talk about superheroes, and first we're going to hear about the history. The second thing is we're going to hear about some beneficial things and some not beneficial things that arose because of superheroes. And then we're going to talk about, and I can't remember what the third thing is. So that's exactly what you do in your introduction. When we talk about organizing your speech, which is going to be coming right up, we'll see basically how you organize your introduction, then the body of your speech, or basically those points that you've mentioned in your central idea. And then you give a conclusion, which is a summary, and then you end it on a high note of some sort. So that's exactly what she did. She gave us a good introduction that got attention and stated what her central thesis is. This is what's going to happen in my speech. I'm going to talk about superheroes. I'm going to cover these 3 things. Bing, bing, bing. Then she moved into her body. Here's the 3 things I said I was going to talk about. First thing, second thing, third thing. All of my points have supporting information from these sources. Then here's my conclusion. As you saw, I talked about superheroes. We learned about this. We learned about that. We did this. And I hope you enjoyed this speech about superheroes. 1, 2, 3. That's your informative speech. Now, she seemed super perky. I mean, her delivery was very up, and kids at that level are basically trained to do that. I'm not expecting you all to be just bubbling over with enthusiasm when we're talking about your speeches or whatever, but I do want you to be conversational. I do want you to be interested in what you're talking about, and I want you to be attention getting. And she definitely did that. So let's see if I have other things I want to tell. Oh, I do. So this leads us to the 2 remote exercises that you'll be doing this weekend before your spring break. And I know I'm giving you stuff to do before spring break, but yeah, you know, we have a short term. What can I say? You're going to be doing work. And if you do it now, it's awesome. If you wait till later, you're going to be stuck. We need to be thinking about your informative speeches right now, because you'll be delivering them before you even know it. So for your informative speech, no, the length is going to be 4 to 5 minutes long. Now, at the same time, that sounds short, but it sounds really long. It makes sense, because let's say we build you a speech like Serena did. You've got your introduction, you've got the 3 main things you want to talk about in your speech, bing, 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 and then you got your conclusion. If you give each of those a minute, that's 4 to 5 minutes, right? So you can do this. So just knowing that that's the time parameter you have for your informative speech in a Word document, I want you to figure out what you're going to be talking about in your informative speech. Time to choose. So I want you to list the general purpose, which, I mean, you should know the general purpose. This is so easy: to inform, because it's an informative speech. But then I want you to give the general topic, and it could be something you've thought of already while we've been brainstorming, doing exercise in class. It could be something different. I want you to narrow that general topic into a very specific narrowed topic and give your specific purpose to inform my audience of that specific topic. Then I want you to write out your central idea. Remember, it has to be a full and complete sentence that says what your speech is going to be about. And then just say what the type of informative speech is. Is it about an object? Is it about a process, an event, or a concept? Easy stuff. I am going to hold you to this, if at all possible. Whatever you choose now, this is what your speech needs to be about, because I'm going to look at these, and some of them you're not going to narrow enough, and I'm going to have to contact you and say, okay, let's work on this a little bit. I just want to make sure that we're all headed in the right direction while we're building our informative speeches. So if I need to contact you in the meantime and say, let's work on some things, we have time to do that. We are going to be talking about organizing your speech in the weeks to come, but you're going to be giving your informative speech very soon. And in fact, I think I have decided completely it is going to be a recorded informative speech. You will record it and submit it ahead of time. I'll probably need you to set up a YouTube page where you can post it, and then I can watch it, because I think the files are going to be too big for you to send in through Moodle. But we'll go over how you set up your own YouTube page if you don't already have one. You might have one already, and then how to upload your video so that we can all watch them in class together. So we're going to be doing that. But for this case, remember, it's a Word document. It's due midnight Sunday. Don't forget to put your name and the date and the class up at the top. This will be your informative speech topic that we'll be hearing about in the next couple of weeks. We have a second remote exercise, telling a joke. Telling a joke is public speaking, and I need to get you used to speaking to your camera, basically, recording yourself doing public speaking. It does take some practice, and so here's where we're going to get a little bit at least. I want you to record yourself with your laptop or your cell phone or whatever you can use. A joke. It has to be a minute to 90 seconds, not longer than 90 seconds, but it has to be at least a minute. It has to be clean, family friendly, hopefully funny, but nothing that's going to insult or offend anybody. So those are my parameters. Do not get you and me in trouble with this assignment. Find a happy, family-friendly, upbeat joke that you can tell. And no riddles, because that's too short. No knock-knock jokes, knock-knock, because nobody's going to be going, who's there after you? Don't do that. Do a real joke. Here are the things I need you to do. Frame yourself horizontally. You often see people shooting themselves like this. This is bad. This is vertical. In the world of communication, in the world of media, we just are like, oh, not this. Because your computer screen and your TV screen and most screens are rectangular horizontally, this is how we want you to shoot yourself. And I shoot yourself, you know what I'm talking, I want you to record yourself giving your joke. If I see this, I'm gonna so come at you. So this is how serious I am as a heart attack, horizontally. And I want you to give yourself a head and shoulders shot, which if you look at me up in the corner, is exactly what a head and shoulder shot is. It's your head and your shoulders. It's like if you were a news anchor and you were trying to show yourself on TV, what you would look like. The hard part is look at the camera, that thing right there. If I look at my screen, which is what a lot of people are wanting to do because it's distracting, it's right there in front of you. My camera though is right there. That's what I should be looking at. See, if I'm looking at the camera, it looks like I'm looking you right in the eye. If I look at my screen, it looks like I'm not even paying attention to you. And if I look at myself, shoot, that's already over here. And I'm just off in the distance. So don't look at yourself. Don't look at your screen. Don't put your joke like here and just read it off because you're not looking at your audience. You're not doing that eye contact. Look at the camera. It's going to be hard because you're not going to be used to it. First thing you have to find is on your phone or on your computer, where is the camera? My camera is right here. So whenever I'm out doing videos for my work, I don't look at the middle. I have to look to the side, right on the edge, right there, and not in the middle, which is where I'm inclined to look. I have to look over here. So find where the camera is on your phone. Then when you're telling your joke, you're going to wait a second, tell your joke, then wait a second, then turn it off. Make sure you're looking at your camera so we can get that great eye contact. And once you get your file done, I want you to rename it with your last name plus joke. So if I were doing this assignment, it would be called Brooks Joke. So when I see it, I know who did it and I know it's the joke file, and then upload it to Moodle by midnight Sunday. So this will give you a little bit of practice on how to properly record yourself doing public speaking. It'll be fun. We'll watch them in class. We'll all be like, ha, 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 that's awesome. Clean, no dirty jokes. I'm serious. All right, so let me stop sharing. Don't forget, you do have a test coming up the week after spring break. It's a Thursday. It's when I'm going to open it up, or Thursday to Friday. I think it's Friday now that I've said it. I'll remind you. I'll get it right. I'll check Moodle and make sure I'm right. But just know this is going to be a multiple choice test. I'm not going to try to make it hard. It's basically going to be on the concepts and the definitions of things we've talked about so far. So you're not going to be having to draw out any processes or write any essays. I just want to make sure you understand the concepts that we're talking about in class. However, it is going to be a timed test. So once you open the test, you'll have a limited amount of time to answer the questions, and you only get one shot. You can't reopen it later and retake the test. It's just how it's going to be. You'll have an amount of time that you can take it, but once you open it up, I believe it is like half an hour is a window, but it's only going to be 10 multiple choice questions. Trust me, you'll know the answers, and if you don't, you just, you know, it's going to be not hard. So that's coming up. Make sure you study the terms, the definitions, the concepts that we're studying, and I don't think you'll have any trouble with it. But make sure you work on that remote exercise and that the topic, the central idea you pick is something that you're like, okay, I'm good with this, and we're going to move forward on this informative speech. I don't want you 2 weeks from now going, you know, I thought that was my topic, but I'm bored with it now. I want to change it. No, you're going to be married to this informative topic. Once you send it into me, that's what we're going with. So got those 2 exercises due Sunday midnight. You're going to have spring break. Woo, woo, woo. When you come back, be ready to boogie because we have a lot to do. Don't forget, you can always contact me by email or text if you have any issues. I don't check my emails like super often, probably usually once an hour. So if you don't hear from me immediately, you could text me, but I will get back to you. Hope you have a great spring break, and I will see you on the Tuesday that we get back. Y'all have a great time.